Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm sitting down with our resident expert to unpack some pretty fascinating source material today.
Hey everyone, really looking forward to getting into this one.
So I want to start today by asking you to just close your eyes for a second. I mean, even if you're driving, well, maybe keep them open if you're driving. But picture a specific silhouette.
Okay.
You've got the bowler hat, the cane, baggy trousers, a coat that's just a bit too tight. And that walk, you know the one.
The waddle.
Right, the waddle.
It's immediate, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't even need to say the name.
You really don't. It's arguably one of the most recognizable visual images in human history. We are talking, of course, about Charlie Chaplin.
Absolutely.
And I think for most of us, and definitely myself included before we started preparing for this deep dive, Chaplin is this he's a vintage mascot.
Yeah, a symbol.
Exactly. He's the funny guy in those flickering black and white movies. He's the universal symbol of early comedy.
He is basically the shorthand for old school funny.
He is, but here is where it gets really complicated. The biographical account we're using as our source material today, it completely shattered that two-dimensional image for me.
Oh, completely.
Because if you look past the mustache and the pratfalls, the actual life story underneath all of that is, well, it's gut-wrenching.
Gut-wrenching is exactly the right phrase, because this is a story of extreme extremes. You have the absolute highest highs of global fame, but they are built on a foundation of the lowest lows imaginable in Victorian society.
Right, and it's not just your standard sad childhood. I know we see that trope a lot in Hollywood biographies. Oh, my parents didn't support my dream, or whatever.
Yeah, the misunderstood artist.
Exactly. This isn't that. This is a story about a literal kid in a workhouse.
An actual institutional workhouse, yes.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a destitute child who was effectively an orphan by the age of 9 somehow became Sir Charlie Chaplin, a knighted icon, a global filmmaker.
And we really need to explore this idea that the source material heavily hints at the idea that his comedy wasn't just him being silly for the sake of it.
It was a survival mechanism.
I'd argue it was the only weapon he had. This whole biography is a case study in the intersection of art and survival.
Wow.
When you really look at the timeline we have here, you start to realize that the Little Tramp character wasn't an invention at all. It was a memory.
Okay, that actually gives me chills. So let's stop looking at the legend and start looking at the reality. We have to go back to the very beginning.
The very beginning.
And when I say beginning, I mean 1889.
April 16th, 1889 to be exact.
Right. Born on East Street, Walworth, in South London. Now, I've been to London. I've seen the palaces and the nice parks and the museums. Is that the London we are talking about here?
Absolutely not. You have to completely erase the modern image of London from your mind.
Okay.
Walworth in 1889 is the London of Charles Dickens, but without that cozy, romantic Christmas filter we usually put on it.
Oh.
Beyond grim. We're talking industrial smog so thick you can actually taste the coal in the air. Overcrowding. Open sewers in some of the poorer parts. This is the absolute depths of the poverty trap of the Victorian era.
And Charlie is born right into the thick of this. But his parents, Charles Chaplin Sr. and Hannah Chaplin, the source, says they were in show business, right?
They were, yes.
So usually when we hear parents in show business, we think, okay, maybe they weren't rich, but they had connections, they had a safety net, some glamour, maybe.
Yeah, you're thinking of the modern entertainment industry. Back then, show business in this context meant the music halls. And we really need to define what that actually means, because this wasn't Broadway.
Okay, so paint the picture for me. What exactly is a music hall in the 1890s?
Imagine a cross between a really rough dive bar and a variety show.
Okay.
It's purely working class entertainment. It's incredibly rowdy. It's smoke-filled. People are drinking heavily in the audience. And the performers, they are living gig to gig.
Hand to mouth.
Exactly. If you don't work tonight, you don't eat tomorrow. There are no royalties, no unions, no safety nets whatsoever.
So it's basically the gig economy on steroids.
Precisely. Now, his father was a singer, a baritone, I believe, and his mother, Hannah, who the source notes is sometimes listed as Hanif, she was an actress and a singer as well.
But just because they were on a stage didn't mean they were financially stable.
Not at all. In fact, the source makes it very clear that this environment didn't protect Charlie from poverty. If anything, it arguably exposed him to the volatility of it even more.
And that volatility hit hard, didn't it? The
Yeah.
source mentions poverty and struggle, which honestly feels like a very polite way of saying their entire lives fell apart.
It completely collapsed. I mean, the parents didn't earn much to begin with, and then they separated.
Right.
The father, Charles Sr., effectively abandoned the family unit financially. So Anna was left trying to make ends meet with a sewing machine and whatever occasional performances she could get.
But her voice was failing, wasn't it?
Yes, her voice started to fail, which is a death sentence for a music hall singer.
And this is where we get to the part of the timeline that I honestly had to read 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating.
The workhouse.
The workhouse. He was 7 years old.
Just 7.
7. I look at 7-year-olds today, and they are, worried about Minecraft and whether they get a juice box with lunch. Charlie Chaplin was sent to a workhouse.
The Lambeth workhouse, specifically.
Can you explain, for those of us who didn't major in Victorian history, what a workhouse actually was? Because I think we have this vague Oliver Twist idea of a strict orphanage, but the reality seems so much worse.
Oh, it is much, much worse. The workhouse was a government institution born out of the poor law system.
Yeah.
And the underlying philosophy behind it was essentially, if you are poor, it is a moral failing on your part.
Wow.
And we will help you so you don't starve in the street, but we will make the help so incredibly unpleasant that you will do absolutely anything to avoid coming here. It was designed from the ground up to be a deterrent.
So they made it miserable on purpose.
Yes. It was essentially a prison for the destitute. When Charlie and his family entered, they weren't just given a room to share, they were stripped of their own clothes. They were bathed under supervision. They were put into coarse uniforms that marked them as inmates to anyone who saw them. And crucially, the family was separated.
Wait, so he wasn't even with his mom?
No. Men, women, and children were all kept in entirely separate wings of the building.
Oh my God.
So picture this. Here is a 7-year-old boy, terrified, hungry, stripped of his identity, and he is physically taken away from the only person in the world who loves him, his mother.
That's heartbreaking.
He might catch a glimpse of her across a courtyard during an exercise period, but he wasn't allowed to go to her.
I mean, that is just psychological torture for a child.
It really is. And then there's the work part of the workhouse, because even the children were expected to labor for their keep.
At 7, what kind of manual labor can a 7-year-old even do?
Well, oakum picking was very common.
Oakum picking? I don't think I know what that is.
It's where you take old tarred ropes
Yeah.
from ships, these thick, hard, crusty ropes, and you have to pick them apart, literally strand by strand, to recycle the fiber.
That sounds awful.
It ruins your fingers. It makes them blister and bleed. The smell of the tar in the room is just overpowering. This wasn't about building character or teaching a trade. This was about breaking a spirit.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare. And this wasn't just a short weekend visit, was it?
No, he was in and out of these pauper institutions for a while. It became the defining trauma of his entire life. The stigma of it, the public shame of being known as a workhouse boy, he carried that forever.
And just when you think, okay, surely it can't get any worse than a 7-year-old picking tarred rope in a prison for the poor, the timeline hits us with the year 1898.
Yeah, the year the floor just fell out completely.
Charlie is 9 years old now, and the source says his mother, Hannah, is admitted to a mental asylum.
Cane Hill Asylum.
What happened?
She had been suffering from severe malnutrition and likely syphilis, which eventually caused these intense bouts of psychosis. Imagine being a 9-year-old boy, already traumatized, and watching your mother, your only real protector in the world, totally lose her grip on reality and then be locked away in an asylum.
It's unbearable. And the father. Where's Charles Sr. during all this chaos?
He is around, technically, but he is dying. He was a severe alcoholic.
Right.
By the time Charlie is 9, his father is in the final stages of dropsy and liver failure.
So just to recap the horror here, Mom is in an asylum. Dad is actively drinking himself to death.
And the source says it very bluntly. Charlie was left to fend for himself.
That phrase, fend for himself, in London in 1898, I'm really trying to picture what that actually looks like. Is he just sleeping on the streets?
Often, yes. Or he's sleeping in these places called common lodging houses, which were barely a step up from the street.
Like flop houses.
Exactly. Just a room packed with desperate people. He's scavenging for food. He's dancing on street corners, hoping someone tosses him a penny. We are talking about a child navigating a massive, dangerous, highly industrial city completely alone.
It's basically Lord of the Flies, but set in South London.
It really is. And this period right here is the crucible. I want to pause here for a second because I think this is the most important point to understand about Chaplin as an artist.
Okay, yeah.
When we see him decades later in his movies, playing the tramp, the outsider, the guy who is always hungry, who is freezing cold, who is just trying to keep his basic dignity while his pants are literally falling down, that isn't acting.
He's replaying his own childhood.
He is actively processing his trauma on screen. He knows exactly what it feels like to be invisible to society. He knows the precise feeling of looking through a shop window at food that you can't afford.
Wow.
That authenticity, that lived experience, is exactly why he connected with the entire world. He wasn't faking the struggle. The audience could feel it.
It's honestly incredible that he survived it at all. I mean, the mortality rate for street kids in that situation, it must have been sky high.
It was staggering. But Charlie had something else going for him. He had the hustle.
That's the perfect transition to our next section, because he doesn't just curl up and die in an alleyway. He starts to work. Let's talk about section 2, the young hustler. The year is 1899.
He's 10 years old now.
Yeah.
And he manages to join a troupe called the 8 Lancashire Lads.
Which, I have to say, sounds exactly like a 90s boy band, but I'm guessing it wasn't.
Not quite. It was a male clog dancing troupe.
Clog dancing, like with the wooden shears.
Wooden soles, yes. It's a very intense form of percussive dance. Think of it like tap dancing, but much heavier, louder, and physically exhausting.
Right.
And again, we have to remember, this isn't some fun after-school club for kids. This is a professional touring company.
So he's 10 years old, and he's out on the road.
He is touring the music halls all across Great Britain, 1899 into 1900. He is earning his own keep.
I just imagine the sheer discipline required for that must have been intense for a kid.
Immense discipline. You have to be perfectly in sync with 7 other guys. You have to go out there and perform, whether you are sick, whether you're exhausted, or whether you're just incredibly sad about your mother.
The show must go on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This was his boot camp. This is where he truly learned physical control. You know later in his movies how he can move his body with such unbelievable precision.
Yeah, how he can just slide around a corner on one foot or dodge a punch by a millimeter.
He's like a ballerina and a clown all rolled into one. And that physical mastery started right here with the Lancashire Lads. It taught him that his body was an instrument.
And crucially, it got him out of the cold.
It did. It gave him a bed, however temporary, and a wage to buy food.
But he wasn't just going to be a dancer forever. The source mentions 1903 as a real breakout year for him in acting. A play called Jim, a romance of cocaine.
Right. This is where he gets cast in his first legitimate theatrical show.
And the role, I mean, you really couldn't make this up. He plays a newsboy.
It's almost too on the nose, isn't it?
It really is. He's literally playing the street urchin that he basically was just 3 years prior.
But that's exactly why he was so good at it. He didn't have to research the role. He understood the swagger of the street. He understood the underlying desperation.
Right, because a newsboy in 1903 wasn't just quietly standing on a corner holding a paper.
No, he had to hustle to sell it. He had to be loud. He had to be charming. He had to grab your attention. Charlie had been doing that just to survive since he was a toddler.
So he's bringing this very real, gritty street energy to a stage play.
And the critics actually noticed. Even though it was a small role, he started to get mentions in reviews. People in the industry saw that there was a distinct spark in this kid.
So he keeps climbing. The timeline says he tours with Saintsbury from October 1903 to June 1904. And the source explicitly notes these plays were immensely successful.
He's moving steadily up the ladder. He's playing much better venues now. He's getting a taste of what it looks like to have an entire audience in the palm of your hand.
And then we hit 1906. He joins Casey's Court Circus. And the source specifically notes this is where he performs comedy acts and really rises to prominence.
This is the major pivot point. Before this, he was a dancer, a dramatic actor, a bit player. Now, for the first time, he is being funny on purpose.
What was comedy even like in 1906? Was it guys standing at a microphone telling jokes?
Not at all. It was heavily physical. It was slapstick.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it was the comedy of violence.
Right, like falling down, getting hit with a plank of wood.
Exactly. Misinterpreting objects, tripping over your own feet. And Charlie realized very quickly that he had an absolute genius for this.
The physical timing.
Yes. He realized that when he fell down in a specific way, people laughed. And when they laughed, he had power over them.
Wow. That is a really powerful realization for a kid who had been completely powerless his entire life.
It changed everything for him.
But, and this seems to be the recurring pattern of his early life, just when things are going well, the rug gets pulled out from under him again. We get to July 1907.
The troupe finishes touring, the gig ends.
And suddenly, this rising comedy star is jobless.
He is out on his ear. The source mentions he lived with a family in Kennington during this time. He wasn't renting his own flat. He was essentially couch surfing to survive.
That must have been absolutely terrifying for him, having finally tasted success and stability, and then staring straight down the barrel of that grinding poverty again.
I think that deep-seated fear never left him. Even decades later, when he was a multi-millionaire in Hollywood, he was famous for being incredibly frugal, sometimes almost uncomfortably cheap.
Really?
Oh yeah. He always carried wads of cash in his pocket. I think deep down, a part of him was always that teenager in Kennington, secretly terrified that the workhouse was just one bad week away.
That anxiety probably fueled his incredible drive, though, because he didn't stay unemployed for long. 1910 comes around.
Jimmy the Fearless.
He played the lead role.
The lead, he's no longer the sidekick or the ensemble dancer. He is the star of the sketch.
Yeah.
And the source confirms it was an immediate success.
This is the moment, right? This is the turning point where he catches the eye of the people across the pond.
This is the golden ticket. The Fred Carnot troupe, which he was a part of, takes him on a tour to America.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 3, the American Dream and the cinematic explosion. We're in 1913 now.
He lands in the United States, and the executives at the New York Motion Picture Company see him perform on stage. They realize instantly that this British kid has a physical comedy style that is completely translation-proof.
And they offer him a contract. Now, I want to talk about the numbers here because the source specifically highlights it. $150 a week.
$150 a week in 1913.
Okay, so I did a little back-of-the-napkin math before we started recording. In 1913, a typical factory worker might make, what, maybe $10 a week?
If they were lucky, it's probably closer to $6 or $8 for common labor.
So Charlie is suddenly making 15 to 20 times the average working wage. Overnight.
To put it in modern terms, imagine you've been scraping by on minimum wage, terrified of eviction, and someone hands you a job offer for $10,000 a week.
It is completely life-altering.
It's winning the lottery. And for a boy who grew up in the shadow of the Lambeth workhouse, that money meant one very specific thing: safety.
He could breathe.
It meant he could never, ever be touched by the system again.
But he didn't just take the massive paycheck and relax into being a studio puppet. The source really emphasizes that he transitioned from just acting to demanding total control. He acted, he directed, and he produced.
Right.
Why was that level of control so important to him? Most actors, especially back then, were just happy to hit their marks and say their lines.
Well, think back to the asylum. Think back to the workhouse. His entire childhood was completely defined by other people controlling his fate.
That makes total sense.
The authorities took his mother away. The authorities forced him into a uniform. He was helpless against a machine of society.
So the Hollywood studio system was just another authority figure for him to rebel against.
Exactly. He absolutely refused to be just a cog in someone else's machine. He had to own the machine. He became the first true auteur of cinema, precisely because he couldn't stand the idea of anyone else telling him how to tell his own story.
And that obsessive control led to some of the greatest films ever put on celluloid. The source lists 3 key ones that we need to dive into. Let's start with The Gold Rush from 1925.
A gold rush. This is arguably his absolute masterpiece.
The source mentions a really specific accolade that critics at the Brussels World's Fair rated it the 2nd greatest film in history. That's not just a casual compliment.
No, it's a massive deal. But let's look at what the film is actually about. It's categorized as a comedy, right?
Right.
But it's set in the freezing, brutal landscape of the Klondike Gold Rush. The tramp character is a prospector.
Yeah.
And he is starving to death.
Yeah.
There's a famous scene, honestly, it might be the most famous scene in the history of silent film, where he is trapped in a cabin, completely out of food, and he boils his own shoe for dinner.
I know that scene. He eats the shoelaces like they're spaghetti.
Yes. He twirls them on his fork. He treats this boiled leather boot like it's a gourmet meal at a 5-star restaurant. He sucks the nails like they are delicate chicken bones.
It is hilarious. You watch it and you can't help but laugh.
But pause for a second and think about what we are actually watching.
We're watching a man slowly starve to death.
Exactly. We are watching a man hallucinating from severe hunger. Chaplin took the darkest, most terrifying experience of human existence, actual starvation, and he turned it into a comedic ballet.
That goes right back to what you said earlier, the intersection of art and survival.
He is telling the audience, I could be starving, the world can be incredibly cruel, but I will keep my dignity. I will eat this shoe like a gentleman.
It's so profound.
It is, and that's exactly why it resonated globally. You didn't need to speak English or French or Japanese to understand the fear of hunger.
That's a great point. Silent film really was the universal language.
And Chaplin was its greatest poet.
Then we move to The Circus in 1928. The source says it's a 70-minute silent film and was one of his highest-grossing movies.
Which is incredibly ironic because the behind-the-scenes production of that movie was an absolute disaster.
Really?
Oh, yeah. His studio burned down during filming. His personal life was in shambles. But what ended up on screen? Pure magic. He plays a clown, but the catch is, he's only funny when he messes up accidentally.
Which is sort of a meta-commentary on his own life and career, isn't it?
It entirely is. He's essentially telling the audience, you are all laughing at my pain.
And then we have to talk about 1936, modern times.
The giant gears. The factory assembly line.
The source notes this film is so culturally significant that it was selected for preservation by the Library of Congress, and it's ranked 33rd on the American Film Institute's list of 100 years, 100 laughs.
Modern Times is a fascinating piece of history because by 1936, talkies, movies with synchronized sound, had been the industry standard for nearly a decade. Everyone in Hollywood told him silent film was dead and buried.
But Chaplin said no.
He said no. The tramp does not speak.
He kept his most famous character silent, even when he didn't have to.
He kept him silent in a world full of noise. But the film itself is this brilliant, biting satire of industrialization and the modern workforce. There's the famous scene with the feeding machine. Have you seen this one?
I think so. Is it the robot contraption that shoves corn on the cob into his face?
That's the one. The factory bosses want to eliminate the lunch hour so the workers can be more productive. So they bring in this machine to automatically feed the workers while they continue working on the line.
Honestly, that sounds like a pitch a tech CEO would make today.
It's terrifyingly relevant. But in the movie, of course, the machine malfunctions horribly. It starts smashing the corn violently into his teeth. It's pouring hot soup down his shirt. It's wiping his face with a mechanical sponge that's way too rough.
It's pure slapstick gold.
It is, but the underlying message is searing. The machine does not care about the human being. The capitalist system will literally chew you up and spit you out for the sake of efficiency.
And there it is again. The boy from the Lambeth workhouse fighting back against the system.
Always. He never stopped fighting that system.
Now, you briefly mentioned his personal life being in shambles during the circus. We really need to transition to section 4, the man behind the camera. Because while his professional life was a steady rocket ship to the moon, his personal life was a car crash.
He was messy. Very, very messy.
The source explicitly lists 4 wives.
4 marriages, yes.
We have Mildred Harris, Lita Gray, Paulette Goddard. And all 3 of those ended in divorce.
And if you look closely at the pattern of those relationships, there is this frantic, almost desperate search for something.
What do you think he was looking for?
Validation, unconditional love, total control. You have to remember he effectively lost his mother at age 9. Psychologists would have an absolute field day analyzing his romantic life. He was clearly seeking a type of connection and stability that he had been completely denied as a child.
But he was also a genius.
Right, and living with a man who is a certified genius, who is obsessed with absolute perfection on set and who is deeply haunted by his past, that is not an easy environment for a marriage.
So you end up with this cycle of instability. Marriage, divorce, marriage, divorce. It weirdly mirrors the total instability of his childhood.
It does, until the 4th time.
1943. He marries Una O'Neill.
The daughter of the famous playwright Eugene O'Neill.
And this one, it actually worked.
It worked beautifully. It was the anchor he'd been looking for. They stayed together for the rest of his life. And the source mentions a really key detail here. They had 8 children together.
8 children? I mean, that's not just a family. That's a small baseball team.
It is a tribe. And honestly, I think this is the most heartwarming part of his entire biography. You look at a man who was abandoned, who was isolated, who was the ultimate societal outsider.
Yeah.
And he ends his long life surrounded by this massive, stable, loving family unit that he built himself.
He finally built the safety net he never had in Walworth.
He did. He managed to rewrite his own ending.
Which brings us perfectly to the actual ending of the timeline.
Yeah.
Section 5, the final act and legacy.
His career longevity was just incredible. The source notes his last film, A Countess from Hong Kong, was released in 1967.
1967. I mean, he started performing with the Lancashire Lads in 1899. That is almost 70 years in the entertainment industry.
Think about the sheer amount of change in the world during that span. He started his career in a world of horse-drawn carriages, gas lamps, and Victorian monarchs.
And he ended it.
He ended his career in the age of the Beatles, space travel, and color television.
And he managed to remain culturally relevant through almost all of those seismic shifts.
He did. He was a true global icon for the entire 20th century.
And then we reached the final date, December 25, 1977.
Christmas Day.
In Coursier-sur-Vevey, Switzerland.
Right. He had moved to a beautiful estate in Switzerland later in his life.
The source mentions there were some political controversies in the U.S. that prompted that move, right?
Yes, there were some complex political pressures during the McCarthy era. We're not going to take sides on the politics of it today, but objectively, those controversies did lead him to leave America and settle in Europe, where he ultimately found a lot of peace.
He was 88 years old when he passed.
A very long life, especially for a boy born in the slums of Walworth who, statistically speaking, wasn't expected to survive past childhood.
There is something incredibly poetic about him dying on Christmas Day, isn't there? The day of family gatherings, the day most associated with Charles Dickens.
It just fits the narrative perfectly. You couldn't write a better ending.
Now, before we close out this deep dive, I want to circle back to a specific quote from the source material. I feel like this quote is the skeleton key to unlocking his whole psyche.
Let's hear it.
Failure is unimportant. It takes courage to make a fool of yourself.
Failure is unimportant.
I just love that. But I also really struggle with it because, let's be honest, nobody likes failing.
No, of course not. We are biologically wired to avoid it. And especially today, right? We live in this highly curated world. Instagram, LinkedIn. It's all about showcasing constant success.
Look at my promotion. Look at my perfect vacation. Look at my spotless kitchen.
Exactly. We hide our failures at all costs.
But Chaplin is saying the exact opposite here. He is saying, lean into the failure. Look at the tramp character. The tramp fails constantly.
He really does. He tries to be elegant at a dinner party, and he trips over the rug. He tries to be romantic with the girl of his dreams, and he accidentally sits on a pie.
But we love him for it.
We love him because of it. If the tramp was perfect, if he was suave and always won the fight and got the girl easily, we would hate him. We connect fundamentally with his vulnerability.
So having the courage to make a fool of yourself isn't just about being a funny comedian. It's about being fully human.
It's about exposing your flaws to the world and saying, this is me. I am clumsy. I make mistakes. I am just trying my best. And that is okay.
That is such a radical idea, especially for a man who came from a place, the Victorian workhouse, where being seen as less than was literally a punishable crime.
He took the deep shame of his childhood and he alchemied it into his superpower. He essentially stood before the world and said, I am a fool, and I am the most famous man on the planet because of it.
That is just deeply inspiring.
It really is. It changes how you view his entire catalog of work.
So let's bring this all together for a final summary. We started this deep dive looking at a funny man in a bowler hat.
And we found a survivor.
We found a boy born into the suffocating smog of 1889 London, a boy traumatized by the workhouse, separated from his sick mother, abandoned by his father.
A boy who learned to hustle on the unforgiving streets, who learned iron discipline in the clog dancing troupe, and who figured out how to turn his personal pain into universal physical comedy.
A man who went from starving on a couch in Kennington to making a staggering $150 a week in New York.
Who demanded total control of his art. Who created masterpieces like the Gold Rush in modern times and made the entire world laugh at the terrors of hunger and machinery.
Who stumbled through a string of broken relationships until he finally managed to build the big, messy, beautiful family he had always craved.
And who left us all with the explicit permission to be foolish.
It's one hell of a story.
It's easily one of the greatest American, global stories of the 20th century.
So here is my final thought, my challenge to you listening right now. We all have a bit of that fear in us. Maybe it's not the fear of the 19th century workhouse, but it's the fear of looking stupid in a pitch meeting or failing at a new hobby.
The fear of falling down in public.
Right. But Chaplin fell down for a living, and he got back up every single time. So the next time you feel like you failed at something or you've made a total fool of yourself, I want you to remember Charlie. Ask yourself, in a world obsessed with looking perfect, do you have the courage to look foolish? Because maybe that failure isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's just the start of your second act.
Failure is unimportant. Courage is everything.
Thank you so much for diving deep with us today. This is one that is definitely going to stick with me for a while.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
We will see you on the next one. Keep exploring.